Thank you for downloading this podcast from Digital Mindfulness. I'm Lawrence Ampofo, and this is episode number 19. Welcome to the Digital Mindfulness Podcast, where each week we speak with experts from around the world about balancing our interactions with technology and how we can live better lives with digital devices and digitized societies. You're in for a treat today because my guest is Professor BJ Fogg. BJ is a behavioural scientist and the director of the Persuasive Technology Lab at Stanford University. He's one of the pioneers of research and applications into persuasive technology and behavioural design. That means that he understands exactly how technology changes attitudes and behaviours. And we talk about this a great deal on the show today. I hope you enjoy this episode with BJ Fogg. So, BJ, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you. I can't wait to have this discussion underway. And yeah, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Hey, thank you for inviting me.
So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What was your journey to be working on persuasive technology and being the director of the Persuasive Technology Lab at Stanford?
Wow. Okay, I'll try to be fast. I have a foot in both worlds. I have a foot in academics and I have a foot in industry, and I've maintained that balance probably for 3 decades, I guess, a long time anyway. And I look back, the journey wasn't clear to me, 20, 30 years ago where I was going. But if I look back and put a narrative to it, I think I've always been really interested in how human beings work and how you influence people, hopefully for the better. And I've long been interested in technology because I grew up in a home that was very geeky, technology forward, and things like that. And so pulling eventually those two worlds came together and became very clear to me at one point that, man, we're going to be using computers and other technologies to change people's behavior. Wow. I want to study this, and nobody was really studying it. So as I applied to PhD programs, that was what I explained at Stanford I wanted to do. They got it. I went to Stanford and ran with my colleagues there the first series of scientific experiments to show that computers could change what you think and what you do. And since then, that's pretty obvious now. You don't have to run experiments to show that's happening all around us. So more and more of my work is now looking at how human behavior works, especially habits and things like that. And technology is a piece of it, but it's not one of the headlines, because that's, it's just, I think, assumed if you're going to help people change behavior, there's going to be some technology component. So essentially, I'm a behavior scientist, obsessed with how behavior works, obsessed with technology, and bringing those worlds together is fun and challenging and sometimes scary.
It's really interesting you say this, because there are lots of other people that I know and lots of other colleagues who would say that technology is just agnostic. The kind of Kranzbergian worldview that it's just a tool and that it has no agency, and it's actually us human beings that bring everything to it. What would you say to that?
That's a nice thought, but I actually don't think it's accurate. When you design, let's say you're designing a survey on Google Docs, a Google form. The way you word the survey influences how people answer it. It influences, I think, part of the rest of their day. Just you're not even designing the interface, but just whenever you design an experience for somebody else, including answering some questions, I don't think that experience is neutral. It's going to have an effect, and it might have mixed effects.
So even things like surveys and, like I say, every time we interact with technology, the way that our behaviours, our attitudes and behaviours are being shaped in some way.
Yeah, it might be small. It might not be recognizable. But certainly, if we create something that other people are using, uh, we can't think that's a neutral experience or it's agnostic. We have, we've shaped at least what they thought about in that moment. And we've chosen either visuals or words or a set of experiences over time for, to be part of their lives. And sometimes that is big and sometimes it's small, but I don't think it's ever just neutral.
So you mentioned that years ago that this perspective, it just jumped out at you that that technology was shaping human behavior and our attitudes. Do you think many people that use technology are aware of the effect that it's having on them?
Well, back in the day, I mapped out this could happen. And I remember drawing these two circles. Here's the world of persuasion and influence. Here's the world of computers and technology. And look at this overlap. It's going to get bigger and bigger. And at that time, kind of to your previous point, people said, no, that's not going to happen, or no, computers can never do that. They're just calculators or they hold data. And I'm like, no, this is what's going to happen. And it can happen. And the experiments show that it could happen. Like this is, and then commercially, and I don't think my experiments influenced this, but things came along like Amazon and so on and said, oh my gosh, I'm shopping more online, or Facebook. And your question about awareness, yeah, man, it's a good one. I'll give a couple of answers. I'm interested in what you have to say. I think on one hand, some people may not be aware at all and they don't want to think about it. And I think some people might go, yeah, it's influencing me, but whatever. I'm willing to give up. I'm willing to make this trade-off to have this experience.
I'm going to follow you with that. I think that's whenever I've spoken to people about this, and I know even when I'm looking at my own behavior with technology, I think there's kind of a dissonance, cognitive dissonance, insofar as I'm very aware that I do have. I don't know. There is something that's drawing me. There is something addictive about looking at Facebook or about getting a retweet or something, that kind of validation. But I think the dissonance in me maybe comes from my experiences. I don't know, somebody that's looking at this critically and that's thinking like, no, of course this can't have an effect on me, and no, it's just ones and zeros. It can't possibly do anything. But I think there is a lot of dissonance between people, particularly when people if you were to ask people just how much time do you spend perhaps on your smartphone just looking at it, maybe kind of they would look at that behavior negatively and just think oh gosh, that's the dissonance right there, that I do engage with it, but I don't believe it's that's having any effects on me.
Yeah, but let me describe. I think we're making lots of trade-offs. Let's take selfie stick as a symbol. Okay, so you can travel, you can do stuff. I'll take the example. About 2 weeks ago, I went to Idaho to go fishing with my dad, my brother, and my uncle. And it's an annual trip we try to do, and it's pretty important. My dad's 80 now. He loves to fish. He grew up in Idaho, so it's like, go connect with dad. Well, so we're there, and of course we take a few pictures. But then when I catch this big fish, it's like, oh, take out your phone and take a picture of this fish. And it's like, wait, am I fishing? Or am I taking pictures of me fishing? And I said, no, I'm fishing. So yeah, I got a few shots and whatever, but it was, it's, and I've had that happen before where you're traveling and you step out of the experience to capture the picture, whether you want it for your own memory or whether you want to impress people online, and it takes you out of the experience of traveling. And I think the selfie stick is kind of I think in some ways the symbol of that is we are not really having the experience. We are capturing the experience to either later relive it or to show off we've had this experience. And that was possible earlier with other film cameras and stuff, but now, because all that is essentially no cost, I just find that really weird. And so the whole selfie stick thing especially makes me go, where are we going with this?
given that technology does have an effect on our attitudes and behaviors, um, are there technologies that influence our behavior for good, and then conversely for the negative?
Wow. Yeah. Yes. And sometimes people create technologies they think are going to be used for good, and they end up being used for the negative. Let me give an example that's near and dear to my heart. And let's talk about photos. Let's talk about Instagram. So a few years ago, in my class at Stanford, I put out a design brief, a design to challenge to students. I said, someday these phones will be able to take pictures. That wasn't doable then, but it was coming. And I said, and someday you'll be able to share these pictures. Come up with a way to use this technology for good. When this happens, what can we do in a good, positive way, influence people in positive ways? Well, one of the students in my class today is the co-founder of Instagram, now 400 million users and growing. Well, back in the day, he and his team came up with the concept of, we'd take pictures of these happy moments in our life and we would send them off to our friends who needed their day to be brightened. And they called the project Send the Sunshine. And it clearly was about helping you brighten somebody else's day. Now, fast forward to how things are really playing out with Instagram. Not with everybody, with some people. But it's a way to, what shall I say, project the fantasy version of yourself to people that you imagine are watching you. So it's not for some people. It's not really about brightening other people's day. It's kind of like showing off. Here's who I am, or here's who I want you to think I am. Here's the cool food I'm eating. Here's the cool places I'm at. Here's the, my cool view of the world. And so I think it's, I'm sure it's used in many good ways. In fact, in my family at a Thanksgiving a couple of years ago, we went around the table and we have this tradition of saying, what are you most grateful for? And this was probably 15 people around the table, and 3 or 4 people said Instagram. And that blew me away, and they didn't know I had that connection to Instagram, whatever. They're like, Instagram. And so in their lives, the ability of Instagram to connect them with other family members and friends, and these were young moms under lots of stress, some of them. And so it really helped them. But I think there's an underbelly to that as well. So I think technologies can go both ways, and some like Snapchat are much more likely to have a large exposed underbelly, and others not so much.
So you're a behavioral scientist, and what I'm very interested to know is your perspective on how we can use technology to develop good habits, especially in an age where technology is specifically set up to distract us. Because a lot of people there are people I've spoken to in the persuasive technology field, and they are kind of, I don't know, they're not fully on the camp of, technology can actually help us develop good habits. There's something else. There's something lacking there that we, like almost like human agency, that we need to develop good habits.
Well, I would agree with that. I mean, there are some technologies that I think are fundamentally created to make people happier and healthier and so on. And then there are some that will exploit you if you let them. And most of them are probably that way because they're run by businesses, and businesses are mostly about making money, and they do that by getting you to pay for stuff or give up information or consuming your time. So, so from a business perspective, certainly there's a bias. They're not necessarily looking out for your happiness and well-being. So I do think that we as individuals need to really understand what is it that we want in our lives and what don't we want in our lives. And how do we leverage technology to bring things into our life that we want? I'll give a simple example, but it's actually, for me, powerful. About 3 years ago, I work a lot. I work like all the time. I'm sure you do, and a lot of people listening to this do. And I just felt like I was getting out of touch with not really my family members, because I use voice call a lot and call people, but just, friends. And so I thought, so what I decided to do is create a habit of every day going to Facebook and seeing who has birthdays. Now, at the time, it was a little bit hard. They've made it easier to do now. But that was my way of every day taking a moment and seeing which friends have birthdays and either writing a quick note or a longer note. And then I pretty much get off Facebook and I may not use it the rest of the day. So I'm using Facebook in that very instrumental way that I decided to do because I had this lack in my life and I wanted to feel more connected to my friends. And I think it's worked.
I guess from what you're saying then is that once you became, I guess, more aware of what you wanted to use Facebook for,
Yeah.
and then actualize that, that's when, I don't know, it sounds like you kind of got more control over your time, and you're able to foster better relationships with your friends.
Yeah, well, or at least feel like it's not slipping so fast from me, but it does lead to, it's at least keeping a connection, like with, old friends from high school or friends from college or, relatives that have moved far away. I think in other cases, like when Apple, a year or so ago, maybe longer, announced, I think they call it continuity, where you could actually do texting from your desktop. I didn't have to be sitting on my phone texting. I am a huge, huge fan of using texting. And even ran a whole conference at Stanford in 2008 on texting for health, which seemed very backwards to people. But, it's such a great channel because, at least in the US, it is very personal. You don't get much text spam. You get tons of email spam, and you go to websites and you get overwhelmed. But text is, at least in the US, a pretty clean channel, and it reaches people. And so I felt like it was even though it's just text, very personal and immediate. But I just didn't like tapping it out on the phone keyboard. That was slow and not fun. So then when the possibility opened up that I could actually type on my computer keyboard and that it would go from device to device, I was like, you know what? I'm going to live a lot more in texting. I'll be able to connect with my brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews through texting. And it really has helped. It's the best channel. In fact, we had a family emergency about a year ago. And it wasn't the first time this has happened, but I think specifically about a year ago. And the way we coordinated and connected as a family was through group text messaging. It was SMS. And that wasn't the first time we've done that. So at least in my family's life, the channel to connect quickly, even about very important issues, is text messaging.
And going back to the instance you were talking about in terms of using texting for health, with regards to things like wearables and Fitbits, etc., I've been reading a lot about how people are kind of almost obsessively looking at these metrics that these wearable devices give them, and of course these metrics, number of steps taken or whatever, or the amount of time that you were active during the day, these are meant to incentivize you to move more, to be more active, or to develop, I guess, better physical habits. Mm-hmm. Do you think that these help? Do you think that these are useful?
Wow, I'll give a blanket answer and then I'll qualify it. In general, no. Most of the tracking devices, people stop using. I mean, you somehow you track your steps. You figure out you take between 7,000 and 9,000 steps a day ordinarily, and you take 3 flights of stairs. And after 2 or 3 or 4 months, it's the same thing. And so, what are you getting out of it? So I think the cost-benefit ratio gets less favorable. So there is a huge drop-off in the industry. Now, that won't always be the case. I think the people the makers of these systems, and I'm working with some of them, will get better at providing ongoing value and help people not just understand or have a temporary excitement around taking more steps, but really help them continue to change and get healthier. And the assumption that I think a lot of the early companies made was if we just give people the data, they will then change their behavior and do better. And that's not how it works in most cases. The number of, the number of steps isn't the thing that changes your behavior. The weight on the scale is not the thing that changes your behavior. In fact, if it gives you a number that you're unhappy with or that makes you feel like you're not succeeding, you'll stop using the technology or the scale. And so it takes you in some ways the other direction. And unfortunately, a lot of the early stuff has been that way, but I'm hopeful that the things coming out now and soon won't just be a fancy calculator that gives you, either news that didn't surprise you or continues to give you bad news. Because that's certainly the bad continual data around how you're not being active or how you're not losing weight does not help you not only not lose weight, it actually, in my research on tiny habits, the implications of what I'm seeing is it has a ripple effect on other parts of your life. And so if you feel like you're failing on your steps, it's going to make you less capable in other aspects of your life as well.
So if you do have these wearable devices and it kind of reports back that, that you haven't moved that much, or you get a notification on your phone like, come on, do something, the ripple effects of that then extend to other parts of your life.
Yeah, and let me explain what I know for sure. So what I'm looking at is, in tiny habits, the method I've created to help people create habits. And I'm coaching people every day, and I'm assessing, I'm evaluating, I'm gathering data every week. So I have tons and tons and tons of data. When people change their behavior, no matter how small, about 75% of them go on and change other behaviors in their life without me prompting them. So there's a natural ripple effect. Success leads to success. So what I said previously is the flip side of that. I don't have data on it, but I believe it's absolutely true that failure leads to failure, or at least increased likelihood of failure. So one of the things I'm starting to talk about more and more is the importance. So if you create a product or service, it's very, very important to help people feel successful. And I actually think those 4 words, help people feel successful, in the future, and hopefully I can be part of this, will become the design principle for many products and services. And as people are saying, oh, do we do this? Do we do that? Well, does this new feature, does this new aspect help people feel successful? And if the answer is no, it's like, no, we should not include this. The bathroom scale does not necessarily help people feel successful. That's why you don't have people raving about bathroom scales or telling their friends to buy bathroom scales or saying, hey, you really ought to get with bathroom scales. Whereas Instagram helps people feel successful. You take a shot, you add a filter, and as you're playing around with the filter, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm an artist, or look how cool that is, right? And then they post it, and there's another level of success. And so people are like, hey, Instagram, use Instagram, right? So it's a different, so I think the core, it's 4 words, help people feel successful. And when we do the opposite, I think we have the opposite effects, and I actually think we really hurt people.
And I guess then, just from a kind of digital perspective, but also, again, you could extend this to general life, that if you do help people to feel successful, they'll come back and use your products or your service, or even in just interpersonal relationships. You're more likely to be friends with somebody, if you can not make them feel like a failure.
Well, exactly, and that's great insight, because usually when I talk about help people feel successful, it's about helping them continue to change behavior. When I'm talking with product people, it's like it gets them to continue to use your product. If they use your product and don't feel successful, they stop. If they do, they're much more likely to continue. And you're right, it extends to other parts of your day. How do you help the person who cuts your hair feel successful? Now, I don't do this deliberately. I think my research has just kind of soaked into me. So I get really cheap haircuts. I go to the cheap place and I give a good tip, so it comes out about even. But there's a woman who cuts my hair, and when I go in, I say, I try to tell her something specific, like, hey, I gave this keynote talk and it was videoed, And so now my video's up there, and so your haircut is now in this video in XYZ, right? And so I think that helps her go, okay, so this this haircut matters. I'm not just like, making a mess on the floor and sweeping it up. I bought these plants at the farm market, and I gave them away as gifts. And then when I went back to the farm market, the next time I went to the farmer or the nursery people, and I said, hey, your plants were a big hit. Here's what I did with them. So, it's a simple thing to do, and it makes you feel great. But I think it also, imagine if you're the person cutting hair or the farmer, that would certainly help me feel successful.
Is there a sense, do you think, that you could perhaps overdo that? And I'm thinking kind of going back to technology, like if you're always getting positively reinforced, is there a sense that you can overdo it and lull people into a...
Yeah. Well, you can do it the wrong way and not be effective, but I don't think you can overdo it in the right way. The wrong way, let me go back to... So back in the day, I ran some experiments to show the effects of computers that praised you. So what happens if your computer tells you did a good job and all that kind of stuff? So I studied all the literature that existed on praise and on flattery. What I was particularly interested in was if your computer told you something like you did a good job and you knew it was fake, that it was just programmed, what effect would it have on you? Well, I'll fast forward to the conclusions. It has a huge effect on you. And I want to believe that it's true, even though you know it's pre-programmed and fake, and you feel happier and you feel more capable and you feel like the computer's smart and all that. But in understanding how to design that system, I looked at the literature on flattery and praise, and one of the insights I had there, which I didn't put in the experiment, but it's always stuck with me, is the most powerful praise you can get is around something that you wish you had or wish you were, but you're uncertain. Something you aspire to, but you're not sure about. So let's say here's a young woman. She's really beautiful. She's always been complimented on her beauty, but she's not as confident in her smarts. So she's at a party, and one guy walks up and says, you're really beautiful. No effect. Whereas another guy might say, wow, that was really smart, or talks about, which one's going to have the most power. It's the thing for which people aspire to but are uncertain about. So to your question, when done well, you would understand what are the important areas in which to help people feel successful and move them along in those areas where it really matters, but they kind of feel on the, what I want to say, on the bubble or on the hinge point, but I think systems will just be, like a fitness system. Like, great, you reached your stand-up goal for today. Well, I've had a stand-up test for 3 or 4 years. So the fact that my watch is telling me that is actually annoying. It's like, okay. But if I was new at it and really striving, then that might really be a good way to help me feel successful. So that's why I say, when done right, I really don't think it backfires or can be overdone.
So talking more generally about habits, I think everybody's going to want to know this, but what is involved in creating habits that stick?
Easy. Easier than you think, anyway. Yes. It's this. Emotions create habits, period. And so I'll probably write a book with that title. I don't think anybody's been that direct and that concise, but that's what it is. Emotions create habits. So as you do a behavior, or right after the behavior, if you have a positive emotion or a net gain in emotion, a release of anxiety, if you have a net gain in positive emotion, your brain will want to do that behavior again. And so there you have it. That's what creates. The stronger the emotion, the faster the habit forms.
So that's why, for example, then we eat food that tastes good, but isn't necessarily good for us because we get that positive feedback whenever we do have that. And that's kind of
Yeah.
glib example, but
Well, yeah. And notice, let's take French fries. And I'm not an expert on like French fries or fast food, but let's just take French fries. You get this, your first bite of the French fry is the best, right? So immediately you get out of the gate, you get this, it's hot and it's crispy and it's salty. When you get to the end of the French fries, it's not like rock, it's not awesome anymore. But your brain has already been like, oh my gosh, that was great. And I put it in mustard or ketchup, what have you. So it is that positive emotional reaction that makes you want to order French fries again the next time.
so if emotions create habits, how can we then do the things that don't feel emotionally good, like running or perhaps even like decreasing our time on social media?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I'm a huge fan of helping people do what they already want to do. And that's one thing I teach in my classes. One thing I teach I teach these 2-day boot camps where people come train with me here in Sonoma County up in the wine country. They're very hands-on small groups and help people do what they already want to do. So if somebody does not want to go out and run, don't pick that as your habit. I mean, the general aspiration might be to get fit, to have more endurance, have more energy, maybe lose weight. But there are a lot of ways, there's a lot of different behaviors you could do to reach that aspiration. So the challenge from a behavior design perspective, and that's what I call my work now in general, behavior design, is how do you match somebody? So let's say somebody has an aspiration to feel more energized during the day, They could assume the way I do that is I go out and I run for 30 minutes in the morning, but I hate running. Guess what? That's not going to become a habit. You can force yourself to do it for a while, but it's never going to become a true habit. So the challenge there is to find a behavior, a set of behaviors you actually want to do and you can do. So maybe it's like dancing for 5 minutes in the morning. Maybe it's, walking with friends at lunch. You like it, you enjoy it. So yeah, so it's, so if you're designing for yourself, pick behaviors you actually want in your life and don't force yourself or, make yourself feel guilty for not doing the shoulds. Pick the wants. And here's what happens. Here's the interesting thing. As you succeed in a domain, like, oh, I'm doing 5 minutes of dancing in the morning, it's fun. The things that felt like shoulds, like running, then become more like wants. So we talked about ripple effect, but there's also a shift in your palate. Just like when you eat foods and wow, I hated that food. The same seems to be true for behaviors. And over time, your tastes will shift and you can get to those other behaviors that were unpleasant or you really didn't want before as you succeed and as your identity changes and in some ways it's a sensibility changes.
Fabulous. So I know you came up with this concept years ago, but can you just share with us what are motivation waves?
Yeah, so we've all experienced these, and the concept didn't have a name. So actually, at a boot camp, the boot campers and I looked at names, and we decided to call this phenomenon motivation wave. What it is when you have a sudden increase in motivation around a certain topic. That's what we call a motivation wave. So in our culture, at least, first of the year, people are in a motivation wave to change their behavior, become a better version of themselves. That then subsides come February, March, April. And so I think we picked wave because it had that sense of it goes up, but it's never going to stay up all the time. It's going to come back down too. We have motivation waves when somebody has a new baby, when somebody's diagnosed with an illness, when you change jobs, when you get fired. There's a lot of earthquakes, fires, things like that. There's a lot of things that create motivation waves. And what it means from a design perspective is while the wave is still high, you can get yourself or you can get other people to do hard things. But when the wave subsides and goes down, you can't get them to do hard things anymore, because to do hard things requires higher levels of motivation. So if you can either anticipate or identify a motivation wave, then you can queue up hard behaviors for people to do and get them done.
So then, I guess then, if you're a charity, it's
Yeah.
easier to get people to donate when, unfortunately, there has been a natural disaster or there is a kind of particularly strong fundraising drive or a anniversary
Yep.
in the year.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you're running a charity, you are in charge of the fundraising, you need to be able to map out when are people, let's call them members or our supporters, when are our supporters in motivation wave? That's when we really push hard to get the big donations. We can get small donations throughout the year. But during the times now notice the motivation wave can be cultural, like there's an earthquake, or it can be more on an individual level. Hey, your 50th birthday is coming up. In honor of your birthday, why don't you support this cause, right? So I've actually mapped out, I'll name names. I've helped Stanford University with their fundraising and their endowment, and so they'll get annual gifts. There'll be smaller gifts that come in on a regular basis, and the effort is to have that be a habit. But then they want to get large gifts, and in order to get somebody to donate millions, you got to approach them when they're in a high state of motivation. Yeah, they have to have the millions, but you need to also time the experience of the request. And I think that should feel really familiar. We all know that, whether you're selling something or asking somebody to do you a favor or trying to get yourself to do something hard, timing matters. And understanding the concept of motivation, right? Either identifying when somebody's in a motivation or predicting when one's going to hit.
Is there value in creating habits or declaring them when we're in the middle of a motivation wave?
Yeah. Well, let's go to the fundraising example, because I think that will generalize out in some other ways. If somebody is in the habit of donating to Stanford, they started as a student, they only donated $10. They give $10 or $20 or maybe $100 once they get a job every year, and they have that habit or routine, whatever you want to call it. They are what they think of themselves as, I donate to Stanford. That's who I am. So as you do a behavior and you feel successful, it shifts your identity. And that is frankly, and this is not a secret. I mean, that's what the annual giving is really about, is to have people have the practice, the routine of giving. And then either when they're in a motivation wave, wow, Stanford, got so many Nobel Prizes or won a football championship, or they get a huge payoff from an IPO, like they started a tech company, now they have lots of money, and they're like, oh, who do I give to? Well, I always give to Stanford, right? That's the connection between getting people to do small things and feel successful, and then when there's opportunity for them to do big things, they step up and do bigger things in the same domain.
And I like how you say that the feeling of being made to feel successful is linked to that as well. Okay, so which sites or apps do a really good job of, designing behavior?
The general answer is, any app that's growing quickly is doing it right. Any app that has millions of users is doing it right. Now, whether they're ennobling us or enslaving us is a different question, but they're certainly triggering us to do behaviors at times we want to do those behaviors. That's what I mean when they're doing it right. So they got that nailed down. In my own life, so I don't go out and use everything out there, and I'm not an industry analyst. But my students will show me stuff, and when we were fishing, my brother showed me an app he uses, which I love. And I don't know why I didn't know this before. It's basically a journaling app where it makes it very easy for you to either type or, even better, audio. You speak, and that's voice to text. And you can add a picture to the journal entry, and you can use it on a variety of devices. And it's like, I really wanted to do something like this, and this makes it even better than I thought. I thought I was just going to be typing. And for me, because it's helping me do what I want to do. And when I have the journal entries, and it's like, it helps me feel successful. And it's just really straightforward and simple. So for me, that's hitting on all cylinders.
Is behavioural design, or I guess, I don't know, digital persuasion, is it more or less effective than doing that same thing in person?
I'm going to give you an answer that everyone hates, and it depends. It depends.
Okay.
I'll give a better answer this way, though. A good human persuader will almost always be better than any technology. And I qualify, almost always. Now, technology, and I outlined this in my Persuasive textbook back in the day. I said, here's what's happening. And I outlined specifically, here are the advantages humans have, here are the advantages technology has. The advantages for technology have grown since then. And so the advantages, I won't go through all of them, but certainly technology can be persistent in ways that humans may not. Humans may give up or feel like it's awkward to remind BJ to, who knows what, write in his journal or something like that. Technology more and more is going to be able to time the triggers correctly. So let's say when I say time, it means when does it prompt me to give a donation or to write in the journal or to track my steps or what have you. And now, because we're carrying these things around with us, that they know where we are, it has access to our calendar and our appointments, it may understand our to-do list, it understands the patterns of our day and of our week. So given all of that, those technologies, it's basically the mobile phone and the people that run the OSs on mobile phones, I think are putting together the pieces and will be able to very accurately know when to trigger BJ Fogg to donate, or to trigger me to watch a video for some company, or to trigger me to write in my journal. So I think technology, 10 or certainly 15 years ago, it was very klutzy. We'd get all these triggers that were poorly timed. But it's going to get better and better. And I think in the future, it's going to be so good, it's going to feel creepy. It's like, wow, how did this organization know that I got a bonus this afternoon? And within an hour, hey, why don't you donate to the, Save the River Fund? That's coming.
Do you think, I know you work in this industry as well, you work in addition to your academic work, you work in the industry, but do you think this is good? The way this is all going?
It's a mixed bag. I've had some students that have tackled that more directly. That gets into the ethics and philosophy pretty fast. And in my Stanford lab, we dealt with some of those issues head on, because, as this was emerging and as people were seeing that, wow, technology is influencing our behaviors, we had to address the goodness and the kind of the moral issues more directly. And so we ran a small conference on it, we published stuff on it, and I got some of my students. I'm not really like a moral philosopher or an ethics person, so I was a little out of my depth. So I'll just answer, it's a mixed bag. And what we can do as individuals is find technologies that help us do what we want to do to make our lives happier. What's going to be very challenging is if people are using a technology that's actually enslaving them or making them less happy, to have some sort of cultural movement to stop that, I think can be pretty tough. So I think we have control over our own, here's how I'm using this. But man, if something is making people excited or making them feel happy, but yet it is damaging them, it's going to be very hard to have a cultural intervention to stop that.
So even, understanding when we're being prompted to do something. Like you're saying, when the notification pops up and we've just had the meeting to confirm our bonus or a raise or whatever, right? When we know that we're being prompted,
That's coming.
maybe it's kind of having that awareness, having a greater awareness of this, digital literacy, perhaps, gives people more control.
Yeah. In that particular example of being triggered to do something at the exact right moment, I think we'll be creeped out by it, but we'll also be very grateful for it.
Yeah.
So let's say, for example, my brother's birthday is coming up and it knows I've not bought a gift. And typically I buy a gift and send it. And it's kind of the last moment that if I don't buy the gift, it's not going to go. So if a technologist said, hey, BJ, you have not bought a gift for your brother yet. Here's what I suggest. Click here to confirm the transaction, get it shipped. I'm going to be going, awesome. Thank you so much, right? So that's thank you. It's like having an awesome assistant or concierge. Now, the poor timing of those triggers will annoy us. Okay, so you and I are talking right now. My schedule knows I have an appointment that started 4 minutes ago, and it knows if I don't call, this person's going to call me because the phone knows that's the pattern. But it also knows I'm talking to you through Skype on my phone. So what just happened was the call came in, it cut us off or it put us on hold, and that was a poorly timed trigger. I mean, that's like technology crashing into each other. In the future, it would probably pop up a notification 2 minutes before the phone call. I'm still blabbing away with you. I'm having a great time talking to you. It's like, BJ, you got an appointment in 2 minutes. Either you want to wrap it up or do you want to let Elizabeth know you're going to be late, right? It's got all the pieces to know that. We're just not there yet. I think it's coming.
But you've also worked on this project, peace.com, where you've kind of been investigating the use of technology to actually create peace. Could you share a little bit more about that? Because I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, so I think it was 2008, I ran a class at Stanford around peace technology. How can we create technologies that promote peace? We eventually started calling it peace innovation. And what we learned early on in the project was it wasn't even just about creating technologies that lead to more harmony in the world. There are some that are already doing it. And how do we, for example, I remember back then couch surfing. So today in today's world, think of it as Airbnb. When you're doing Airbnb and you're staying in people's homes, that's certainly bringing people together in a positive way. YouTube, we felt, was helping people have empathy for others, and Facebook and so on, at least then, really helped you see things from other people's perspectives. So it wasn't just about creating new technologies. It was like, how are existing technologies doing this, or how could they be doing this? Fast forward, we spun that out of the lab into a new group called Peace Innovation, and they're independent from my lab, and they continue to do interesting work.
I know that time is running away from us, so where can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, I think my most boring website is the best starting point. Yeah, at bjfogg.org. It's mostly a list of links. It's a dashboard to get to other places. I have a bunch of lab websites and a bunch of other websites outside of Stanford. And you'll have to click around, but that's the best place. Go to bjfogg.org and click around, and also search on some videos. And there's more coming. I mean, in the coming months and years, I'm going to be doing a much better job of sharing my work. I've been developing and teaching a lot of stuff, but not really sharing it in a global way, except for Twitter, maybe. But bjfogg.org. Thanks for asking that.
Brilliant. No problem at all. And I'll make a link to all of those in the show notes. But BJ Fogg, thank you so much for sharing your time and wisdom with us today.
Thank you. It was really fun talking to you.
Well, that was excellent. Understanding how technologies influence how we think and behave was eye-opening for me. I hope you found useful the ways that you can create positive habits in your lives and how you can create better relationships with your digital devices. If you like the show, please leave us a comment or a rating, as this means the world to us here. Until next week, when we'll be back with more amazing people sharing strategies and wisdom on how to live with tech. Take care.